Is this a good idea, this new national inquiry?
I called for it in January, along with many others. I wrote about it in the national press, my local press, and I called for it in Parliament. It was always necessary to have a national inquiry to get to the bottom of this, because it was a monumental failure on the part of local authorities and the police. And I totally agree with my co-panellists about the need to collect ethnicity details, which is what Louise Casey's called for. And the reason for that is, it's as plain as the nose on your face. This was largely about men of Pakistani origin abusing girls that were principally white. There was an ethnic aspect.
But if it's as plain as the nose on your face as you suggest, why do we now need to collect why was it a mistake not to collect ethnicity data in the first place?
Well, mistake because there was an assumption on the part of the authorities, to some degree born of a fear of being called racists, that somehow if they made it more woolly, if they didn't collect that data, they didn't come to the conclusion, which I said was very plain, that it would be lost and there would be no offence caused, the community relations we maintain, all of those things. Maybe perfectly laudable ambitions in general terms. What it led to was what amounts to a cover-up, really. And, you know, I was never satisfied with that, and I've said so many times. So there's an issue here about particular cultural assumptions. The first person to make me aware of that in graphic terms was Sajid Javid, the former Home Secretary. Of course, his own family came from Pakistan. He said there's an ethnic aspect to this that needs to be explored.
When you say there was a cover-up that was taking place during your party's numerous years in government.
Well, it was taking place locally. So if you look at the people who have responsibility in the localities around children's safety, around children's services, that was local authorities. Police, of course, had local responsibility for dealing with crime. Sometimes the girls involved were vilified. They were characterised in a particular way. Because they were girls from difficult backgrounds or they came from children's homes and so on, and they were preyed upon. So the cover-up, in a sense, was the unwillingness to take this seriously. And it was always serious, and we now know how serious. And I'm going to say one other thing. Who's to know what's still going on? Who's to know?
And you were saying during the break that you'd had some sort of early stage experiences in trying to combat this. Tell us more about what that was all about.
I want the other panellists to have their turn, as I'm sure you do, but I'll just say this. I commissioned a piece of independent work under the chairmanship of a chap called Professor Mohammed Abdul Haq. He brought together a panel. It wasn't political. They were drawn from the licensed taxi trade. They were drawn from the charity sector. Susie Lamplugh Trust were involved. A couple of Labour MPs were on that as well, the late Frank Field and so on, looking at taxi licensing. Because what Louise Casey's also found in her report is a close tie to the taxi trade. Because taxi drivers know each other. They can communicate easily. They have mobility by definition. And a lot of this abuse could take place in their vehicles, or the vehicle could take the victims to where they were abused. So I did that work, made a series of recommendations about improving safety. Some were taken on board by the Tory government. Some still stand to be taken on board. A good example would be that all taxi drivers should be able to speak English. By the way, I remember when Mohammed Haq made that point, he said when he first came to Britain, he couldn't, by the way, but learned to speak English because he's a migrant himself to Britain. And there should be things like recording devices in taxis and cameras so they don't become hiding places. Those are some of the recommendations. There are a whole series of them.